Okay, the first chapter of our A2 syllabus is consumer theory and utility. In this chapter, we'll be learning how consumer make choices based on their preferences and based on their budget constraints. But before starting anything, I want to talk about one very basic economic concept so that things will make more sense to us in this chapter. So the concept that I want to talk about is consumer rationality. Consumer rationality. Now, what do we mean by a consumer rationality? We say that in economics, we say that the consumer is rational. That means he will, the consumer will always, he will always, sorry, he will always act in his self-interest, in his self-interest. Now, what is the self-interest? By self-interest, we meant he will always be looking for the ways to maximize his own benefit. His primary goal will always be the maximization of his own benefit, of his private benefit. Private benefit. Okay. Now let's just keep this concept in mind so that when we move ahead, things will make more sense to us and so that we can understand better how consumer thinks and what is the consumer theory exactly. Okay, so now let's start with the utility. See, the goal of consumption is to get the satisfaction out of it. The motive behind consuming any good or a service is to get the satisfaction. Now, the satisfaction that we get from the consumption of any good or a service is called utility. So, basically, utility is the satisfaction. If I was very hungry and I had five packets of chips and I ate every single one of them, so the satisfaction or the utility that I get from consuming all the units, all the packet of chips that I had will be called my total satisfaction or the total utility. So the total utility or TU is the total satisfaction that we get from the consumption of all the available units in a given time period that we consumed in a given time period. Now another concept that I want to talk about is marginal utility. Now, what is the marginal utility? Acha, one more thing. You will be hearing a lot of this word marginal in your syllabus in A2 economics. You will be hearing a lot of this. Remember that from the word marginal, we will always be talking about the marginal means extra. In economics, the marginal means one additional or one extra. I'll explain that in a minute. So, the marginal utility is the extra satisfaction from consuming one additional unit. Okay, so understand these both of these concepts better. Let's look at the graphical representation of each one of them. Let me draw a graph. Okay, so I have drawn these two graphs side by side to help us understand the concepts of total utility and marginal utility in a better way. Okay, so on the y-axis, I will take the total utility, and on the x-axis, we'll take the quantity of goods that we have consumed. In our case, it was the quantity of chips. Uh, Secondly, the marginal utility, and same the quantity of goods that we have consumed. Acha, let's plot this graph and see what our total utility will look like. So, for example, when I consume the first packet of chips, the satisfaction or the total utility I get out of it was 10. And on the second packet of chips, it went up to 15. And for the third, it went to 18. Let's say it's 20 and 21. Now let's join these points so that we can see what a graph will look like. But one more thing to remember, the total utility curve will start from the origin, because when you are not consuming anything, when you have not consumed a single unit, the total utility will be zero. Okay, let's join these points. So this is how the total utility curve will look like. Now, as you can see, as I keep on increasing the quantity of chips, the total utility keep on increasing, but the extra satisfaction that I get from the consumption of each unit is decreasing. Let's say, uh, at the beginning, when I was not consuming anything, the total utility was at zero, and then after consuming one single packet, it went up to 10, from 0 to 10, and then again it went up to 15, which is the extra satisfaction that I get from this consumption was 5, and then the, it keep on falling. However, the total utility is increasing, but the rate at which it is increasing is the decreasing rate. So we'll say the total utility will increase, but at the decreasing rate. The rate that we are talking about here is actually, in the mathematical term, we call it the slope. Now, what is the slope? So the slope is the rate of change, or the formula for the slope is change in y upon change in x. Now let's see what the slope of total utility curve will look like. So if we look at the change in y, all the values I've written over here are the change in y on the y-axis. First it was 0 to 10, and then it went up to 5, and then to 3, 2, 1. So all these values that I've written over here are the change in y-axis, and on the x-axis we can see that the change is only one. When it went, the difference between 1 and 2 is 1, and then 3 and 2 to 3 is also 1, and then 3 to 4 is also 1, and then 4 to 5 is. So if I try to write the formula of the slope of total utility curve, it will look like this. The change in total utility, because on y-axis we have total utility and on x-axis we have quantity. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be wrong to say this formula will look like this. This formula, the first formula, the formula of slope, will look like this when I put it in the context of tu. So in other words, we're saying that the slope of the total utility curve is telling us about the extra satisfaction that we get from the consumption of every additional unit that we consume. So, can we say that the slope of total utility curve is also our marginal utility? Because that is true. The slope mu, your marginal utility, is the slope of total utility, and the values of slope, the values of tu changing, are written over here. So these values shows us how total utility is increasing but marginal utility is falling. Now let's plot the graph of marginal utility. and we'll look at the reason why when TU increases, marginal utility falls. But let me plot the graph of marginal utility first. Okay, so 10, 5, 3, 2, 1 was our marginal utility, and I plot these values here as well on our marginal utility curve. Now let's join all these points so that we'll see what our marginal utility curve will look like. So this is our MU, or our marginal utility curve. As you can see that whenever the as we are increasing the consumption, of of our good, our additional satisfaction or the marginal utility will keep on falling. The reason behind this is because of the law of, let me change the color, is because of the law of diminishing diminishing marginal utility. Now, as per the law of diminishing marginality. Now, why do we call it a law? Because it works like a rule of thumb for most of the products. We can see this pattern. We can see this law happening whenever there is a increase in the total utility. The total utility will be increasing slowly, but your marginal utility will be falling, because as we keep on increasing the consumption, the additional satisfaction that we get from every additional unit will be lesser than before. So, as per the law of diminishing marginal utility, the total utility rises slowly at a decreasing rate, but the marginal utility will be falling because every additional unit will provide the lesser satisfaction than the previous one. Okay, so that is it for this video. In this video, we did the introduction of the utility. We understand the concept of marginal utility and total utility. We learned how to draw the diagrams for total utility and marginal utility. We also learned that the marginal utility is the slope of total utility, and this concept will help us to understand this concept will help us to draw the marginal utility curve. If you remember, the marginal utility is the slope of your total utility, so it will be easier for you guys to draw the marginal utility curve in the exam. Thank you.